Hi, folks. I've never made a video like this before. In fact, until probably 15 minutes ago, I was not even aware my computer had a camera built into it. So bear with me if this is not the most professional publication you've ever seen. But I would like to take a little bit of time today to talk about missions, in particular, missions at South Maine. In the times of the pandemic and the crisis we're in, it can be pretty easy to focus internally on your own needs and your family's needs. I do that, um, but I'm also remembering about there's a lot of other people out there in the world, and sometimes others need our help as well. So let's take, if I can, give me 5 minutes to talk about what's happening with missions at South Maine, and we'll give you an update on what's happening in both China and Zambia. Let's start with China. Now, as most of you are aware, we sponsor a missionary family in China, Ken and Debbie Z, along with their two boys. We've been working with them for at least 6 years when I became head of missions. Ken and Debbie are native Chinese, both speak fluent English, both have learned and trained here in the United States. They were last here 2 years ago. In fact, we had planned to bring them to Texas again this summer, but with the pandemic, that's been put on hold indefinitely. Ken leads a mission effort that is actually not allowed by Chinese law. Up until the recent pandemic, they would hold Sunday services and Bible studies each week. Their growth was limited because they want to make sure they do not draw attention of the authorities, in particular the police. Once they get greater than 100 people, they know of cases where the police will come in and shut down all services and make it very difficult for the missionaries to reestablish themselves. Excuse me. So whenever they get up to about 75 or 80 people in attendance, they intentionally divide the church and start a separate church, and Ken and Debbie continue to grow with the first half. With the pandemic, Ken now runs a virtual church service, the Chinese version of Zoom. Attendance each week right now is running about 50 people. Ken reports that hosting services without personal interaction is extremely challenging. He says most families are getting by just by reading the Bible and praying at home and doing home church. But he says he knows a lot of their folks, a lot of the parishioners are struggling in faith. And he and Debbie have been reaching out to them one on one and doing a lot of personal counseling. It's not been easy, especially now. China is truly a police state. Um, Visitors to their city, if you come there now, you have to be quarantined in a special hotel for 14 days before you're allowed out in the population. Everyone outside must wear a mask. Of course, we're getting more of that here. Um, Everywhere you go, you're in a supermarket, public transportation, any store, any shop, you must scan in with your cell phone. So people always know where you are and where you have been, so they can trace if the pandemic does erupt there, if virus does erupt there again, they can trace where you were. Your temperature is checked routinely at all indoor places, and guards are stationed outside of all apartment complexes to limit and record who's coming in and out. They still spend time out in the city, out and about, but it's very difficult to get around. Ken reports they have access to plenty of food and medical supplies. Their physical needs are fine, but they would very much appreciate the prayers of the church. We'll come to that in a minute, but I want you to especially think of what it's like to live in a state where people always know where you are and where you're coming and going. It has to be trying in itself, and I know it is for the people there now. Let's switch gears and go to Zambia. The situation in Zambia is a bit more complex. South Maine has been sponsoring Sokantala Kanuga and his family, for at least 10 years now. They live in Livingston, which is in southern Zambia, right next to the border of Zimbabwe. As you may recall, South Maine helped Sokantala purchase a small farm in northern Zambia They call it Graceland. That was purchased, I guess, 6, 7, 8 years ago. This farm raises crops for local sale. They make some money on it, but a lot of the crops are also given away to the poor. People need food. About 4 years ago, we raised money to help Sokantala install a bee farm, really to expand his beekeeping operation there. That's been quite successful. In fact, I've tried the honey from there, and it's quite good. Um, that's the good news. The bad news in this is about 3 years ago, a South African company filed suit claiming they own the land, they own Graceland, as well as about five larger properties in the immediate area. Sokantela and his lawyers believe this claim is false. They believe it's a company just trying to grab the land for their own purposes. They believe they purchased the land and they have the rights to it. However, they lost the lawsuit, and which they immediately appealed, and then lost that appeal. That was about maybe 5, 6 months ago is when that last appeal was verdict came in. Since then, they filed a final appeal that is still working in the courts and probably won't be determined for another year or so. As I look at this, it just seems to me that Zambia's legal system appears to reward those who have political and financial resources, and not as much what is right and what is wrong. However, that's where it is, and Sokantala is continuing to fight for his land, and we support his doing what he thinks, what he firmly believes is the right path. Now, let's change gears a bit again and talk more specifically about Zambia in 2019. That was not a good year for Zambia. It didn't make local news here because the Zambian government has not been publicizing this. But Zambia went through a severe drought last year, particularly in the southern half of the country where Sokantala and his family reside. This drought affected many, many farms in the area. The crops just withered, and there were people who never had asked for assistance all of a sudden had the cupboards bare, and they were just scrambling for food. Sokantala notified our elders about this, and late last year we sent $20,000 to him to buy food for the locals there, just really to survive. It was not just food. We also bought some seed corn so their farms could be replenished once the rains came. Very difficult time. In fact, we sent another $10,000 in 2020 because the situation was so dire there. Now, along with the drought, it caused other problems as well. Zambia gets much of their electrical power from hydro generation. These are electrical generators located on the rivers in Zambia. With the lack of rain, the rivers more or less dried up, very low levels, and so electrical power generation also was curtailed. In fact, Zambia has been going through rolling blackouts now, where people get 2 to 4 hours of electricity a day in Livingston. The problem is you don't know when you're going to get power. So that makes things like cooking very difficult. For example, how do you know when to bake bread if you don't know if your oven will be able to turn on? So it makes life very, very hard. Larry and Barbara Cobb and my wife Kathy and I visited Sokantala and Henrietta at their home in Livingston last October. It was we arrived there in the middle of the drought, in the middle of a heat wave. It was 106, 107 degrees outside, and it was, you could call it a dry heat, but it was still pretty darn hot. We went to Sokantala's house and sat an afternoon in his living room. He has a very, very spacious living room filled with leather couches and comfy chairs. It can probably hold 20 people. And that's where Sokantala and his wife bring in many people who discuss their family issues, problems, issues of spirituality. It's a place where they do their best to make people feel at home. So when we came back, we worked with the elders and we sent them $11,000 additional to install a generator set and an air conditioner for their home. In addition, the money was used to buy a generator set and an air conditioner for the Riverside Church. Just a way to help ease them through the crisis and give it a place where people can be just maybe a bit more comfortable to deal with the current situation there. Now, as regards to what's happening with the pandemic there, Zambia is a landlocked country. All their borders have been closed, so no one can come into Zambia at this point. All gatherings, similar to here, all gatherings have been shut down, so they cannot run a normal church service, even though at this point there's been no cases of COVID-19 being reported in Livingston. You must wear a mask to go outside, and that's created problems because a lot of Zambians are poor, and some cannot even afford a mask. So the church has been gearing up there to produce masks for people. Speaking of church, they cannot run a church service there, even a Zoom church service. A lot of Zambians don't have access to computers. So most of Zambia right now, most of the Riverside Church are meeting home church now. And Socantel is keeping in touch with those. They currently know of about 120 people are meeting in home church, which is about half of what they typically see on a Sunday. As far as needs, they've asked South Main if we would consider sending an additional donation, one for food and also two for material to help the church continue to make masks for those without. A very difficult time indeed. Would you please join me in prayer? Dear God, part of the Great Commission is to reach out to the entire world and bring the message of Jesus. We very much wish to do that in a manner that is in keeping with your word and in a style that is the right way for where our missionaries are located. Father, we ask you to bless our mission efforts. We ask you to bless our missionaries as they do your word in very difficult, very trying places. Give us the courage to continue to reach out and comfort those and bring the word, and also to be a source of comfort and strength that everyone needs from time as they face difficult circumstances. Father, we ask all this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Folks, that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time and attention.